Hi there, and welcome back to our daily reading from the book The Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumley Thompson. If you remember in our last reading, Dorothy, the Cowardly Lion, and Sir Hokus fought a giant made of taffy and then found their way to Fix City, which is a city where the people don't move and the furniture does. And that's where we're going to pick it up today in our reading of Chapter 13, Dancing Beds and the Road That Unrolled. It must be a shipwreck, thought Dorothy, sitting up in alarm. She seemed to be tossing about wildly. Time for little girls to get up, grumbled a harsh voice that seemed to come from the pillows. Dorothy rubbed her eyes. One of the bedposts was addressing her, and the big four-poster itself was dancing a regular jig. "Oh, stop!" cried Dorothy, holding on to the post to keep from bouncing out. "Can't you see I'm awake?" "Well, I go off duty now, and you'll have to hurry," said the bed sulkily. "I'm due at a lecture at 9. "Lecture?" gasped Dorothy. "What's so queer about that?" demanded the bed coldly. "I've got to keep well posted, haven't I? I belong to a polished set, I do. Hurry up, little girl, or I'll throw you out." "I'm glad my bed doesn't talk to me in this impertinent fashion," thought Dorothy, slipping into her dress, combing her hair with her side comb. Imagine being ordered about by a bed. I wonder if Sir Hokus is up. Parting the curtains, she jumped down, and the bed, without even saying goodbye, took itself off. Sir Hokus was sitting on a stile, polishing his armor with a pillow slip he had taken from his bed, and the Cowardly Lion was lying beside him, lazily thumping his tail and making fun of the passing furniture. "Have you had breakfast?" asked Dorothy, joining her friends. "We were awaiting your ladyship," chuckled the Cowardly Lion. "Would you mind ordering 2 for me, Hokus? I find 1 quite insufficient." Sir Hokus threw away the pillow slip, and, talking cheerfully, they walked toward King Fixit's circle. The beds had been replaced by breakfast tables, and the whole street were busy eating busily. "Good morning, King," said Sir Hokus. "4 breakfasts, please." The king rang a bell 4 times without looking up from his oatmeal. Seeing that he did not wish to be disturbed, the 3 waited quietly for their tables. "In some ways," said Dorothy contentedly, munching on a hot roll, "in some ways this is a very comfortable place." "In sooth 'tis that," mumbled Sir Hokus, his mouth full of baked apple. As for the Cowardly Lion, he finished his 2 breakfasts in no time. "And now," said Sir Hokus, as the tables walked off, "let us continue our quest. Couldst tell us the way to the Emerald City, my good King Fix? If you go, go away, and if you stay, stay away. That's my motto," answered King Fix shortly. "I can't have people running around here like common furniture," he added in a grieved voice. All the Fixits nodded vigorously. "Let them take their stand or their departure," said Stick and Plaster firmly. The king felt in his pocket and brought out 3 pieces of chalk. "Go to the end of the street, choose a place, and draw your circle. In 5 minutes you will find it impossible to move out of the circle, and you will be saved all this unnecessary motion." "But we don't want to come to a standstill," objected Dorothy. "No, by my good sword," spluttered the knight, glaring around nervously. Then, seeing the king looked displeased, he made a low bow. "If your highness could graciously direct us out of the city—" "Buy a piece of road and go where it takes you," snapped the king. Seeing no more was to be got out of him, they started down the long street. "I wonder what they do when it rains," said Dorothy, looking curiously at the solemn rows of people. "Call for roofs, silly," snapped a Fix, staring at her rudely. "If you would spend your time thinking instead of walking, you'd know more." "Go to and swallow a gooseberry," roared the knight, waving his sword at the Fix, and Dorothy, fearing an encounter, begged him to come on, which he did, though, with many backward glances. Fix City seemed to consist of one long street, and they had soon come to the very end. "Odds daggers!" gasped Sir Hokus. "Great palm trees!" roared the Cowardly Lion. As for Dorothy, she could do nothing but stare. The street ended surely enough, and beyond there was nothing at all. That is, nothing but air. "Well," said the Cowardly Lion, backing a few paces, "this is a pretty fix." "Glad you like it," said the wheezy voice. The three travelers turned in surprise. A huge Fix was regarding them with interest. His circle, which was about the last in the row, was about 20 times as large as the other circles, and on the edge stood a big sign, "Road Shop." "Don't you remember the king said something about buying a road?" said Dorothy in an excited undertone to the knight. "Canst direct us to a road, my good man?" asked Sir Hokus with a bow. The Fix jerked his thumb back at the sign. "What kind of road do you want?" he asked hoarsely. "A road that will take us back to the Emerald City, please," said Dorothy. "I can't guarantee anything like that," declared the Fix, shaking his head. "Our roads go where they please, and you'll have to go where they take you. Do you want to go on or off?" "On," shivered the Cowardly Lion, looking with a shudder over the precipice at the end of the street. "What kind of road will you have? Make up your minds, please. I am a busy man." "What kinds of roads do you have?" asked Dorothy timidly. It was her first experience at buying roads, and she felt a bit perplexed. "Sunny, shady, straight, crooked, and crossroads," snapped the Fix. "We wouldn't want a cross one," said Dorothy positively. "Have you any with trees at both sides and water at the end?" "How many yards?" asked the Fix, taking a pair of shears as large as himself off a long counter beside him. 5 miles, said Sir Hokus, as Dorothy looked confused. "That ought to take us somewhere." The Fix rang one of the bells on the counter. The next minute, a big trap door in the ground opened, and a perfectly huge roll bounced out on his feet. "Get on," commanded the Fix, in such a sharp tone that the three jumped to obey. Holding fast to Sir Hokus, Dorothy stepped on the piece of road that had already unrolled. The Cowardly Lion, looking very anxious, followed. No sooner had they done so than the road gave a terrific leap forward, and that stretched the three flat upon their backs, and started unwinding from its spool at a very terrifying speed. As it unrolled, tall trees snapped erect on each side and began laughing derisively at the three travelers, huddled together in the middle. Glad we only took 5 miles," stuttered Dorothy to the knight, whose armor was rattling like a Ford. The Cowardly Lion had wound his tail around a tree and dug his claws into the road, for he had no intention of falling off into nothingness. As for the road, it snapped along at about a mile a minute, and before they had time to grow accustomed to this singular mode of travel, they gave a final jump and set them circling into the air and began rapidly winding itself up. Down, down, down whirled Dorothy, and fell with a resounding splash into a broad stream of water. Then down, down, down again, almost to the bottom. "Help!" screamed Dorothy, as her head rose above the water, and she began striking out feebly. But the fall through the air had taken all her breath. "What do you want?" A thin, neat little man was watching her anxiously from the bank, making careful notes in a book that he held in one hand. "Help! Save me!" choked Dorothy, feeling herself going down in the muddy stream again. "Wait, I'll look it up under the H's," called the little man, making a trumpet of his hands. "Are you an island? An island is a body of land surrounded entirely by water. But this seems to be a somebody." Dorothy heard him mutter as he whipped over several pages of his book. "Sorry," he called back, shaking his head slowly, "but this is the wrong day. I only save lives on Monday." "Stand aside, you villain!" A second little man, exactly like the first, except that he was exceedingly untidy, plunged into the stream. "It's no use," thought Dorothy, closing her eyes. for he had jumped in far below the spot where she had fallen, and was making no progress whatever. The waters rushed over her head the second time. Then she felt herself being dragged upward. When she opened her eyes, the Cowardly Lion was standing over her. Are you all right? He rumbled anxiously. I came as soon as I could. Fell in way upstream. Seen Hocus? Oh, he'll drown, cried Dorothy, forgetting her own narrow escape. He can't swim in that heavy armor. Never fear, I'll get him, puffed the Cowardly Lion, and without waiting to catch his breath, he plunged back into the stream. The little man, who only saved lives on Monday, now approached timidly. I'd like to get a statement from you, if you don't mind. It might help me in the future. You might have helped me in the present, said Dorothy, wringing out her dress. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'll make a note of that, said the little man earnestly. But how did you feel when you went down? He waited, his pencil poised over the little book. Go away, cried Dorothy in disgust. But, my dear young lady, I'm not your dear young lady. Oh dear, why doesn't the Cowardly Lion come back? Go away. The second little man, dripping wet, came up hurriedly. I was only trying to get a little information, grumbled the man sulkily. I'm sorry, I couldn't swim faster, said the wet little man, approaching Dorothy apologetically. Well, thank you for trying, said Dorothy. Is he your brother? And could you tell me where you are? You're dressed in yellow, so I suppose we must be somewhere in the Winkie country? Right in both cases, chuckled the little fellow. My name is Ran, and his name is Memo. He jerked his thumb at the retiring twin. Random and Memo, you see? I think I do, said Dorothy, half closing her eyes. Is that why he's always taking notes? Exactly, said Ran. I do everything at random, and he does everything at memorandum. It must be rather confusing, said Dorothy. Then, as she caught sight of the Cowardly Lion dragging Sir Hocus, she jumped up excitedly. Ran, however, took one look at the huge beast and then fled, calling for Mem at the top of his voice. And that was the last Dorothy saw of these singular twins. The lion dropped Sir Hocus in a limp heap. When Dorothy unfastened his armor, gallons of water rushed out. Sho, good of you, choked the poor knight, trying to straighten up. Save your breath, old fellow, said the Cowardly Lion, regarding him affectionately. Oh, why did I ask for water at the end of the road? Sighed Dorothy. But anyway, we're in some part of the Winkie country. Sir Hocus, though, was still spluttering, but was beginning to revive. Yon noble beast shall be knighted. Hud's daggers, that's the second time he's saved my life. Rising unsteadily, he tottered over to the lion and struck him a sharp blow on the shoulder. Rise, Sir Cowardly Lion, he cried hoarsely, and then fell headlong. And before Dorothy or the lion had recovered from their surprise, he was fast asleep, mumbling happily of dragons and bludgeons. We'll have to wait till he gets rested, said Dorothy, and until I get dry. She began running up and down, then stopped suddenly before the lion. And there's something else for Professor Wogglebug to put in his book, Sir Cowardly Lion. Oh, that, mumbled the Cowardly Lion, looking terribly embarrassed. Who ever heard of a cowardly knight? Nonsense. No, it isn't nonsense, said Dorothy stoutly. You're a knight from now on. Won't the Scarecrow be pleased? If we ever find him, sighed the lion, settling himself beside Sir Hocus. We will, said Dorothy gaily. I just feel it. Chapter 14. Sons and Grandsons Greet the Scarecrow. Although the Scarecrow had been on Silver Island only a few days, he had already instituted many reforms, and, thanks to his cleverness, the people were more prosperous than ever before. Cheers greeted him wherever he went, and even old Choo-Choo was more agreeable and no longer made bitter remarks to Happy Toko. The Scarecrow himself, however, had 4 new wrinkles and was exceedingly melancholy. He missed his carefree life in Oz, and every minute that he was not ruling the island, he was thinking about his old home and dear, jolly comrades in the Emerald City. I almost hope they will look in the magic picture and wish me back again, he mused pensively. But it is my duty to stay here. I have a family to support. So he resolved to put the best face he could on the matter, and Happy Toko did his utmost to cheer up his royal master. The second morning, after the great victory, he came running into the silver throne room in a state of great excitement. "The honorable offspring have arisen," announced Happy, turning a somersault. "Come, ancient and amiable sir, and gaze upon your sons and grandsons." The Scarecrow sprang joyously from his throne, upsetting a bowl of silver fish and 3 silver vases. At last, a real family. Ever since his arrival, the 3 princes and their 15 little sons had been cruising on the royal pleasure barge, so that the Scarecrow had not caught a glimpse of them. "This is the happiest moment of my life," he exclaimed, clasping his yellow gloves and watching the door intently. Happy looked a little uneasy, for he knew the 3 princes to be exceedingly haughty and overbearing. But he said nothing, and the next minute the Scarecrow's family stepped solemnly into the royal presence. "Children!" cried the Scarecrow, and with his usual impetuousness rushed forward and flung his arms around the first richly clad prince. Take care, ancient and honorable papa," cried the young silverman, backing away. "Such excitement is not good for one of your advanced years." He drew himself away firmly, and adjusting a huge pair of silver spectacles, regarded the Scarecrow attentively. "Ah, how you have changed! He looks very feeble, too, Fang, but he may live long to rule this flowery island and our humble selves," said the second prince, bowing stiffly. "Do you not find the affairs of the state fatiguing, darling papa?" inquired the third prince, fingering a jeweled chain that hung about his neck. "I, as your eldest son, shall be delighted to relieve you, should you wish to retire. Get back 10 paces, you!" he roared at Happy Toko. The poor Scarecrow had been so taken aback by this cool reception that he just stared in disbelief. "If the 3 honorable princes will retire themselves, I will speak with my grandsons," he said dryly, bowing in his most royal manner. The 3 princes exchanged startled glances, then, with 3 low salaams, retired backward from the hall. "And now, my dears," the Scarecrow looked wistfully at his 15 silken-clad little grandsons. Their silver hair, plaited tightly into little queues, stood out stiffly on each side of their heads and gave them a very curious appearance. At his first word, the 15 fell dutifully on their noses. As soon as they were right side up, the Scarecrow, beginning at the end of the row, addressed a joking question to each in his most approved Oz style. But over they went again, and answered merely, "Yes, gracious Grandpapa," or "No, honorable Grandpapa," and the constant bobbing up and down and the papaing so confused the Scarecrow that he nearly gave up the conversation. "It's no use trying to talk to these children," he wailed in disgust. "They're so solemn. Don't you ever laugh?" he cried in exasperation, for he had told them stories that would have sent the Oz youngsters into hysterics. "It is not permissible for a prince to laugh at the remarks of his honorable grandparent," whispered Happy Toko, while the 15 little princes banged their heads solemnly on the floor. "Honorable fiddlesticks!" exclaimed the Scarecrow, slumping back on his throne. "Bring cushions." Happy Toko ran off nimbly, and soon the 15 little princes were seated in a circle at the Scarecrow's feet. "To prevent prostrations," said the Scarecrow. "Yes, old Grandpapa," chorused the princes, bending over as far as they could. "Wait," said the Scarecrow hastily. "I'll tell you a story. Once upon a time, to a beautiful country called Oz, which is surrounded on all sides by a deadly desert, there came a little girl named Dorothy. A terrible gale—" "Well, what's the matter now?" The Scarecrow stopped short, for the oldest prince had jerked a book out of his sleeve and was flipping over the pages industriously. "It's not on the map, great-grandpapa," he announced solemnly, and all of the other little princes shook their heads and said dully, "Not on the map." "Not on the map, Oz? Of course it's not. Do you suppose we want all the humans in creation coming here?" Calming down, the Scarecrow tried to continue his story, but every time he mentioned Oz, the little princes shook their heads stubbornly and whispered, "Not on the map," till the usually good-tempered Scarecrow flew into a perfect passion. "Not on the map, you little villains!" he screamed, forgetting they were his grandsons. "What difference does that make? Are your heads solid silver?" "We do not believe in Oz," announced the oldest prince serenely. "There is no such place." "No such place as Oz? Happy, do you hear that?" The Scarecrow's voice fairly cracked with indignation. "Why, I thought everybody believed in Oz." "Perhaps your Highness can convince them later," suggested the Imperial Punster. "This way, offspring." His master, he felt, had had enough family for one day. So the 15 little princes, with 15 stiff little bows, took themselves back to the royal nursery. As for the Scarecrow, he paced disconsolately up and down his magnificent throne room, tripping over his kimono at every other step. "You're a good boy, Tappy," said the Scarecrow as Happy returned. "But I tell you, being a grandparent is not what I thought it would be. Did you hear them tell me right to my face they did not believe in Oz? And my sons! Ugh!" "Fault of their bringing up," said Happy Toko comfortingly. "If your Serene Highness would just tell me more of that illustrious country." Happy knew that nothing cheered the Scarecrow more than talking of Oz, and to tell the truth, Happy himself never tired of the Scarecrow's marvelous stories. So the two slipped quietly into the palace gardens, and the Scarecrow related, for the 14th time, the story of his discovery by Dorothy and the story of Ozma, and almost forgot that he was an emperor. "Your Highness knows the history of Oz by heart," said Happy admiringly, as the Scarecrow paused. "I couldn't do that," said the Scarecrow gently, "for you see, Happy, I have no heart." "Then I wish we all had none," exclaimed Happy Toko, rolling up his eyes. The Scarecrow looked embarrassed, so the little punster threw back his head and sang a song he had been making up while the Scarecrow had been telling his stories. The Scarecrow was standing alone in a field, inviting the crows to keep off. When the straw in his chest began tickling his vest, he couldn't resist a loud cough. The noise that was heard so surprised every bird that the flock flew away in fright. But the Scarecrow looked pleased, and he said, "If I'd sneezed, it wouldn't have been so polite." "Ho, ho!" roared the Scarecrow. "You're almost as good at making verses as Scraps. Write that down for me, Tappy. I'd like to show it to her." "Hush!" whispered Happy, holding up his finger warningly. The Scarecrow turned so suddenly that the silver pigtail pinned to the back of his hat wound itself tightly around his neck. No wonder! On the other side of the hedge, the 3 princes were walking up and down, conversing in indignant whispers. "What a horrible shape our honorable papa has reappeared in! I hear that it never wears out," muttered one. "He may continue just as he is, for years and years. How am I ever going to succeed him, I'd like to know? Why, he may outlive us all." "We might throw him into the Silver River," said the second hopefully. "No use," choked the third. "I was just talking to the Imperial Soothsayer, and he tells me that no one from this miserable kingdom of Oz can be destroyed. But I have a plan. Incline your royal ears. Listen." The voices dropped to such a low whisper that neither Happy nor the Scarecrow could hear one word. "Treason!" spluttered Happy, making ready to spring through the hedge. The Scarecrow seized him by the arm and drew him away. "I don't believe they like their poor papa," exclaimed the Scarecrow, when they were safely back in the throne room. "I'm feeling older than a kinkajou. Ah, Tapioco, why did I ever slide down my family tree? it has brought me nothing but unhappiness. We're going to end our reading there as we finish that chapter. Come back again tomorrow and we'll read a few more chapters and find out more of what is happening in our story. Until then, I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.